Hello, Jeff Big Daddy Wayne here. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in to Big Daddy Knows. And today we have a very serious subject. Should we spank or not spank children? It's a very, very controversial subject. I know I've seen it on Facebook where people go crazy, running the gamut from beating a child, which should never be done. There's a lot of difference between beating and spanking, okay? Just let me say that. And there's a time you stop spanking a child. When I was 28, I told my dad, it has to stop. But they'll go from beating a child to not spanking a child, trying to intellectually connect with a 2-year-old creature that crawls around like a caterpillar on the rug. But as I address this subject, and I'm going to give you several ways to make a child behave. This isn't just about behavior. This is about helping a child learn about boundaries, getting along in the world. It starts when they're little, okay? Now, I've put a lot of thought and effort in this. Hopefully, I'll make it amusing and entertaining for you today. And out of respect for the children, I'm not smoking today. I have this lollipop, which I thought would bring us into the mode of remembering children are happy little creatures. They're innocent. They don't know. When a 2-year-old child sees fire and wants to put its hand in the fire, that's because it doesn't know. It's a child. It's your adult is the parent. Now, some people would say, Jason, don't put your hand in the fire. Now, at 2 years old, Jason has no ability to understand intellectually what you're saying. Most people would give Jason a little tap on the hand. Jason then associates pain with fire. He doesn't put his hand in the fire. Now, some people don't believe you should ever physically touch the child in such a manner. Of course, when the child grows up with burned, deformed hands and goes, how did this happen? Well, you were putting your hand in the fire and I didn't want to harm you in any way. I think there's another discussion at hand there. It's a bad pun at hand. But this is just my thought, okay? I can talk about spanking because not only do I have 3 children, but more importantly, I was a child myself, so I can speak from experience. Also, as a child, I would watch some families not spank their children. They had other forms of punishment. Some families that didn't spank their children, there was no punishment. They let the children run wild. And they were idiotic, stupid children, I may say. They all wound up in jail. And there were families that disciplined their children, spanked their children. There were families that didn't spank their children. And there were some families that didn't even care about their children. Their children just ran wild. T, listen to me, darling. I'm talking about animals can be treated the same way. Like rubbing a dog's nose and its dew. That way the dog learns not to poop in the house. Or rolling up a newspaper to correct it. And soon the dog learns when it sees a rolled up newspaper, uh-oh, watch out. Now T was never disciplined like that. Therefore he shits all over the house. We have to move a lot. I'll just tell you that. We'll just move a lot. But we have a very happy dog. I believe I'd be a very happy human if I got to shit wherever I wanted, but that's a different video. Anyway, you could do the same thing with a child, by the way. Rub their nose in dew to keep them from crapping, and maybe a rolled up newspaper. Now that would be a bit harsh. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just throwing these things out, ladies and gentlemen. I've prayed about it. I've thought about it. I've read about it. I lived it. I've experienced it. I was spanked as a child and spanked as an adult. But that's another story, isn't it? Reminds me, I have to apologize to that young lady. I didn't know the duct tape would take off that much hair. You know, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to give you tips on this thing, okay? Every parent has to make up its mind how it wants to get the child to behave. Some parents decide on a timeout. Timeout! And the child's concept of life is if they run over somebody with a car and rob a bank, jail is just timeout. That's all it is. Of course, for me, timeout was for my old man to switch hands. That's all timeout was. Timeout is when I was unconscious for 3.5 minutes. That's what timeout was. Now, we can compound this discussion by talking about calling your child a name. If you call your child negative names, it reinforces a negative attitude, ruins their self-esteem. The flip side of that is overpraising a child where they think they're little snotty geniuses, you know. I think you should just be straightforward with your child and treat it like a child. Don't treat it like an adult. It's a child. A baby doesn't know what a child doesn't know. Don't overpraise, don't underpraise. In fact, I think you should even speak to your child. It encourages them to want to learn how to communicate, and you can do that in a number of fashions. Now we're going to start demonstrating ways to make your child behave, okay? And perhaps you want to show this to your child. In fact, that's one of the reasons I'm shooting this. This is an instructional video that you could show your child to let them grasp the different methods you could use to make them behave if they're not behaving, if they don't listen. I don't know if they have truant officers anymore. When I was a kid, if you didn't go to school, they sent a truant officer out to catch the kids who were usually smoking. It was called playing hooky. Now it's probably freedom awareness or something like that, some way to capture their real spirit. Let them be free. Let them discover themselves. Well, Columbus discovered America, and as a lot of you know, that wasn't a good thing. Maybe he was just discovering himself. I don't know. I'm just going to give you some pointers here. And let's start with physical discipline. Now, in relation to physical discipline, I wanted to go to the most successful society on our planet today, which is China. China is the comer. It's growing economically. It has healthy people. Not a lot of diversity in their culture in terms of races, but we won't, that we're not holding that against them, They're the society, though, that's going to replace the United States economically and nuclear weapons and every other way. They're writing the books and the TV shows. Watch Chinese TV. You will be educated. Now, one of the things I've learned about China is, and this comes from China itself, a friend brought this back, a Chinese friend who likes Italian food cooked at a Mexican restaurant. I don't understand it. He brought this back to me when I told him I was discussing this subject. He said in street markets in China, they sell this little stick, which is used on children once they begin to walk to the ages of 3 or 4. And it's just a stick. I don't know which side they use, but obviously just probably to hit on the tail, to hit on the rump. I don't think Chinese people are violent or cruel, but they do graduate into karate, as you know. Something to think about. And I would be afraid of a Chinese child because they carry those little stars after a while. Those little pointy stars can be very violent. Anyway, as you know, the Chinese, once a child is, say, 10 or 12 and is not showing any intellectual capacity, not progressing in school, they automatically regulate the life to 9 to 5 as a factory worker. Perhaps that's why they're coming along. They're pretty objective. The child's not producing a good report card. Well, we know where to funnel his or her talents, as it may be. So, anyway, I wanted to use China as the symbol here. And this little stick, which comes from China, sold at street markets, will progress. The Americans usually will use a strap, a belt. Any strap or belt will do. I remember my dad used to use a strap, and we used to enjoy my father giving us a spanking. Not enjoy, but we would prefer him to my mother, who would use a shoe or anything handy. Women are usually emotional. Mothers freak out. They throw things at you, scream, call you names. My mom was particularly violent. She would use they were orange. They would use Hot Wheel tracks to beat us with, or a ironing cord. She used to like the ironing cord. But Dad would spank us at the end of the day, take off his belt. He was tired. It was more formal than anything, And later we bought him slacks with built-in belts. Therefore, he had to take off his pants to spank us, which he was very tired. It was very labor. So anyway, they use a strap, and usually you spank him on the butt. You spank him on the butt, the tail can take it. And you don't have to spank him hard. I'm not talking about beating a child. I don't want anybody to think that I would beat a child. Just a little, 1 or 2 swats. You folks don't remember that they used to spank kids in schools. Does anybody remember that? And the majority of kids didn't turn out bad. They turned out okay. Because those kids do. I don't want to be spanked. A, associating B, pain. See what I mean? Even though I've been married a couple of times, I might marry again. I can't grasp the pain that I went through. I'm stupid. So now, teachers used to spank in school. We had orderly schools. They stopped spanking. As you know, we have disorderly schools. They send the kids home to the parents now who probably are at work, laboring, trying to pay the taxes for unborn generations. We're already $64,000 in debt per child that's born. A cane can be used to discipline older children. You can use it on younger children, but a cane must be effective. The entertainer and famous movie star singer Bing Crosby at one point told his son Gary, "The belt don't work on you anymore. I'll use a cane." That was our Bing. He wasn't just dreaming of a white Christmas. And Bing gave him a little bang. And 3 of his 4 sons all committed suicide. Make of it what you will. A bat is something you can use on an unruly teenager. And I want to go back to the cane in a minute. I want to talk about a bat. A bat can use for personal protection against your teenager when they start to attack you. I don't know if you're allowed to fight in self-defense. Defend yourself against an unhappy, unruly teenager. But a bat, you crack somebody over the head with a bat, that usually does the trick. Of course, today's children are so thick-headed, I don't know if anything would happen. By the way, back to orderly societies, Malaysia, I believe it's Singapore. They have caning. They have caning in Singapore. And about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, some smart aleck American kid spray painted some guy's Mercedes and he got arrested. They were to cane him. And people in the United States, "Oh, it's cruel, it's cruel." Hey, you work all your life to get a Mercedes and let some punk spray paint him. What would you want to do? If you go, "Oh, you shouldn't cane him." And I said, "You shouldn't cane him this way. You should cane him that way. That's what you should do, little punk." Anyway, moving on. And I even thought the value of a lollipop like this, you could bust it over the head of a child. I mean, it's pretty thick, you know. And then they could eat the instrument of terror, lick it, and create some more psychological confusion. But let's press on to the main deal. This is what I've come up for ways to not physically discipline your child. Most children usually grasp something. I suggest you buy a puppet like this puppet. You take the puppet, and it should be about their size, so they might even think it's a companion. Now you take the puppet and you kiss it. See? Like I kiss you. Then you take the puppet and go, "Bed! Bed! Tap, tap, tap!" 3 little taps to show it. So maybe the child, instead of doing something to the child, it puts its hand in the fire. You put the puppet's hand in the fire and let it see it black and on fire. And maybe even have like a recording of a puppet scream, "Ah!" You know, or just tap, tap, tap its little hand, see? So the child may start it. This is what they do sex-wise with kids, you know, where you touched here, where you touched there, where you touched here, you know. You getting the idea, ladies and gentlemen? This might be the future of how to make children behave. By just taking a little puppet, turning it over, and showing them, "We will pat your tush. We will," of course. Or let's take the Chinese route, shall we? Let's think about this. I wouldn't use a bat on a child. Okay. But this might be the wave of the future, these little Chinese things. Because look at it. That's not going to hurt you. It's not like a switch. You know, it's not a switch. I remember when my mom would go outside and get a switch. That's where I was born in Kentucky. White trash would use switches. Just, boy, they would tear into the skin. That brings back a memory. Dear old Mommy. Mommy would say, "Go out and bring me a switch." And I'd come back with a twig. She didn't find it humorous. She would go out and find something and really make me feel the pain. I love my mommy. That's why I used to sing, "I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad. She was a pearl and the only girl Daddy ever had. A good old-fashioned girl with heart so true. She'd never think about leaving you. Why should she leave? She has a home, furs, jewelry, minks, servants. Tap, tap, tap that little tail. Tap, tap, tap that little tail." And then the child gets like the dog with a newspaper. It sees that switch, and it realizes it better be good, or something's going to happen to hurt me. Because the child isn't intellectual now. It's physical. It understands. A swat! A swat! It understands a kiss and a hug, but it also understands that. Whack, whack, whack! 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Go, cat, go! Let me tell you something. We remember when kids behaved in school. Do you remember the song from the 19th century? Reading and writing arithmetic, taught to the tune of a hickory stick. You see, ladies and gentlemen, don't ignore the wisdom of the ages. Now, if everybody starts buying these little, and get a female for the girls, this for the boys, this will create a whole new industry. Mothers and fathers will suddenly realize the value of using this little puppet to demonstrate, I don't want to harm you, because you don't want to beat your child. Well, there are times we all want to beat our child, you know that. But that's a different video. You have to control yourself. The state has agencies now. You can be put in jail. Anyway, tap, tap, tap. Or tap, tap, tap. Or if they're really bad, how about you punch that little prick? You motherfucker! You step out of line again! Of course, that would be extreme. But then again, sometimes children do things that are extreme. I'm only offering this to you today, ladies and gentlemen, as an idea to create a whole new industry, factories making these puppets, people buying these puppets, children associating the puppet with behavior, children not having an imaginary playmate. My children had imaginary playmates. I spanked them also. Let me tell you something. This is the future, and I discovered it, and I want credit. And I want you to subscribe to Big Daddy Knows.